Bombshell Brunches, where your hosts Raquel Rudenberg and Christina Lau sip and spill with badass babes every Tuesday morning.
Good morning, world. I don't think I've ever been more nervous about having a guest on a show, and you will soon find out why. I do want to say that Raquel sends her regrets. She's not available today, and this was a very important conversation that I needed to have with this particular guest, and so we thought it would be a good idea for me to do it just one-on-one, just me and you, guest. Mystery guest. As you can see, if you're on the YouTube channel, you can see a photo there, and we'll get to that a little bit later. But I am not going to give you much of an introduction. I am just going to ask my guest to say hello.
Hello, everyone. Ni hao ma. Ni hao ma. Acha hai. Ramaracha. We're all well. I'm glad to be here.
Oh, everybody who is listening, welcome to my mother. Hi, Mama. This is Mama Lau.
Hello.
Hi, Mom.
Hi.
Hi.
I think I earned that name, Mama Lau. I don't know how.
Because you've been cooking meals for everyone I know for all of my life. Meals, parties, entertaining. We'll get to all of that. But as many of you know, in North America, it's Asian Heritage Month, or in the United States, it's Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. And so I was talking with Raquel about what we would want to do to celebrate and also to kind of talk about some of the stories around the Asian diaspora. And I was like, oh, who can I think of that would be the most appropriate person to recount some very, very heartfelt stories? And so because my mother is the most popular person on my Instagram and on all of my social media, I thought it would be best to invite this celebrity herself to come and talk to us. So, hi, Ma. Are you ready to tell us the whole family story?
Yes, thank you so much for that wonderful introduction, Christina.
Welcome. Oh, why do you call me Christina? It sounds like I'm in trouble.
You're always in trouble, but never mind.
No, I know. I really am.
Yeah, you work too hard.
This is not about that right now. This is not about that, Mom. Okay.
So what would you like to know about my life?
Okay. So this is what I thought we would do. I thought we would start at the Lao village, because one of the big things I wanted to talk about was Asian heritage, and obviously, you know, I've had a lot of back and forth about being mixed race, being from different cultures, but I've always been so obsessed with our family culture and our family history, and we have such a long family history. So one of the things I wanted to celebrate with Asian Heritage Month is, really talking through the story of how our family came to be in Canada. Because Mum is a Canadian citizen, for those of you who don't know, and they moved over in the 60s. The family moved over in the 60s. So I wanted to take us back into kind of the old school Lao origins, and then I want you to tell the story of how we got to Canada through Nepal, through India, through cultural revolutions, through the wars.
Okay. Well, I think you got something wrong there. It was in the 70s that I came to Canada, not the 60s.
Was it bad?
Yeah. So basically, let me just explain. The Lao village is actually a village in China, in the Guangdong province, in an area called Sun Tak in Guangdong province. And the Lao village is Xiu Lo Chun. There's a little Lao village and there's a big Lao village. We come from the little Lao village, which is Xiu Lo Chun.
We're the little
but,
Laos.
Yeah, well, they were the little Laos. And my mm, my grandfather and my father came from the little Lao village, but my mother's father came also from Suntak, but from another village called Ma Chun. So they came from different villages and they didn't know each other when they were in China. When the Japanese and my father, his family were quite wealthy. So they had fish ponds, they had silkworm factories, and they had farmland.
Wait,
So
you didn't tell. So, but why were they wealthy? You haven't told the story of the Lao name.
this was like in the old dynasty. Well, originally, apparently, the Lao name was not Lao; it was Zhao, Zhao. But what happened was one of the ancestors was working for the emperor, and he was such a good soldier and he was such a good general, that the emperor said that he was gifting him the name of Lao, which meant hardworking. So because he was a hardworking person, so his name got changed to Lao. And then, of course, then the whole village, where I guess this was like in centuries gone. I don't really know the full history.
But I thought there was a rumor that that general was like a really famous general, and there were rumors that they were going to overthrow the emperor, and the emperor then said, "No, take this land instead and prosper," and so he did.
I'm not 100% sure about that.
Where did I get that story from, Ma?
Probably from your grandfather.
Okay.
Maybe my father told you.
Yeah, Kong probably told it. It's written down. We have it written down somewhere. But,
yeah.
Okay. So we became kind of nobility.
Yeah.
Right.
And then when the Japanese came and during the war, just before World War II, the Japanese invaded China, and then there was this long battle of, I think it was 14 years or something.
That's right. It was 1931 when the Japanese invaded Manchuria, and then it ended in 1945. But the communist revolution had started in the 20s.
Well, they were fighting, like at one point, the communists and the Kuomintang and the Communist Party,共产党, they both got together. They joined forces in order to get rid of the Japanese. Right. And once that was done, then they had their civil war. Then they split up again to become communist China. Right. So during all this upheaval, my grandfather left India. I mean, left China to go to India to work. So my grandfather went to China to work in 1922. This was before the war, because he just went there to get work. And while he was there, he had asked his wife, my grandmother, to join him in India. But my grandmother refused because grandmother had a good family, and they were wealthy, and she had everything in China. She didn't want to go to this foreign land where she didn't speak the language and go and live there. So what my grandfather did was, because my grandmother wasn't coming, he actually cohabited with a Nepalese woman and had 2 sons. Right? And then what happened was,
really diplomatically. Wow. He cohabited with.
Yeah. So he had
2 families.
Yes. But what happened then is then with the Japanese war, Akong, my father, left China to join his father in 1924.
But he didn't know that was going on? Did he just show up and be like, oh, random new people?
He didn't. I don't think they knew. But what happened was, he not only because the Japanese were then in China and they hadn't come to the village yet. So my father decided to take his mother and his younger brother with him to go to India to join his father. So then the whole family went to India.
Why did India let them in?
I don't
was
think
that
in
just
those
easy to
days,
do?
it was easy to do. And
Okay.
India let in a lot of Chinese immigrants because they were skilled workers.
Right.
And it was British rule then.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
So the British wanted all the skilled workers to help them build things for the war. And my father actually went to build the aerodromes for the British for the war effort.
I thought he went to the tea plantation. Or was that Sukgung?
My grandfather went to the tea plantation.
Okay.
Your Nana's father went to the tea plantation to work in the tea plantation.
Okay, so when was all of our all of our riches taken away from us? Which revolution was that?
When the communists took over. That was later because when I used to speak to my grandmother, she used to say, if you go back to China, go to my house and behind this wall, and if you pull out the brick, all my jewelry is hidden inside there. Right? She said, I did, but because of the war and all that, they'd broken down all the walls. The house that my grandmother had was all broken down. I saw just like freestanding walls and stuff because one of the relatives was living there, an old lady. She was all by herself. And the whole place was like destroyed because of the war, bombing and all that sort of stuff. So we didn't find anything. But my grandmother used to talk about how her headboard was gilt in gold. You know, she had this gold headboard. And I guess she reminisced a lot about what she had lost because of the war.
Oh, yeah, I would if I had a gold headboard. I'd be like, I would be missing that also. I'd be like, what? Oh, now I just have a normal headboard. I don't have a gold one.
Anyway, so then my father went to India with his mother and younger brother. And of course, when they got there, my grandmother kicked out the other woman, but kept the two sons.
I remember this story. This is monstrous.
So nobody knows what happened to the other woman. But the two sons were adopted by my grandmother.
Okay.
And so they grew up, they stayed with my grandfather, and they grew up as stepbrothers to my father.
Oh.
Right?
Okay. But then Sukgung at this time?
He was in India, but he died in 1954.
No,
so, oh, you're talking about my mother's father?
No, I'm talking about Sukgung, like Sukpa and Sukgung.
Sukgung is my great father's
Akung's brother. Akung's younger brother. What happened to him?
So
where was he?
That's what I just said. My father had taken his mother and younger brother, which is your Sukgung, to India.
All right, this is getting complicated. Right? Yeah. I was just like, where did he go? Where was he? Because they're in Toronto now. They're not. He definitely didn't die in 1954.
No, because he was very young. Akung decided to take him with it to India. So then they reunited as a family. But in 1954, my grandfather died. Right? Okay. So Akung's father died. But in the meantime, your grandfather, my father, was working in India for the British until after the war. Right? So he worked in building aerodromes for the British, for the war thing. And when the war was over, then Akung, my father did different jobs. He worked as a waiter and a carpenter, and then, a journeyman, whatever job he could find. Mm-hmm. But he had gone to work with his father. And then when he was in 1944, around 1944, his father decided, well, you're old enough now to get married. And in those days, it was all arranged. So, in the Chinese community, they'd say, oh, who's got daughters who's old enough to get married? And then somebody said, oh, yeah, I know this Mr. Wong. He's got a whole bunch of girls. And and my Mr. Wong, my grandfather Wong, my mother's father, had girls from his first marriage, and his wife died, and he got remarried and had another 3 girls.
Well, he's had so Mr. Wong is a real person who had a bunch of girls.
Yes, Mr. Wong is my grandfather.
It's my grandfather.
Your great-grandfather.
Okay.
Right? So my grandfather, who was working in the tea plantations, he's the one who was working in the tea plantations, had all these daughters.
Okay.
He had 4 daughters. And the thing was, because he was working from plantation to plantation, when his wife died, my grandmother, from my mother's side, when she died, my grandfather married a local to look after his children and had another 3 girls.
Oh.
So when he had this other 3 girls, the first 4 girls were married off. Wherever they could find a good husband, they were married off. So my mother was only about 15 when she got married off to my dad.
And Nana was Chinese Nepalese.
Yes, Chinese Nepalese, but not from my mother never wasn't from Nepal. Her mother was Nepalese, but in India.
Okay. But Nepalese by blood.
By blood. But she died when my mother was very young. So my mother was actually born in Kurseong, India.
Oh.
In a hill village in India, near the Darjeeling, the mountains, near the Himalaya mountains, at the base of the Himalaya mountains. Right. That's where she was born.
Oh, I thought that was in Nepal. Okay, but it was,
no.
Yeah, it was on.
It was in India. So then, when my mother was married off, because like my aunts were married off one at a time, they were all married off to different people, and my mother got married to my father. They didn't know each other. And
until the wedding day?
They met, I think, once or twice. They just looked at each other. But they didn't speak the language. Right? My father spoke very little Indian, just to say a few things, very simple, because he'd only been in India a few years. So he knew how to speak in Indian a little bit. My mother spoke no Chinese at all. So my mother only spoke Nepalese and Hindi, right? So when they got married, my father took my mother to Calcutta to start their wedded life. And my grandmother was there. But my grandmother spoke nothing but Chinese. And she expected a Chinese wife. And my mother was nowhere near a Chinese wife. So I guess that's the first generation of mixed.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and even then it's Nepal through India, really.
Yeah. So actually my mother would have been the first Chinese Nepalese mixture. And of course, in India, in the Chinese community, my mother was considered an outcast. They used to call her San Cow, which meant mountain dog, which meant you were like a mutt. You were not Chinese. So my mother wasn't accepted as Chinese, and she wasn't accepted as Indian, because the Indians thought, hey, you're a Chinese, you're a Chinese person. And the Chinese said, no, you're not Chinese, you're mixed, you're more like an Indian. So my mother was already at that apex of not belonging anywhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
And the first generation Chinese to not have bound feet as well. If she'd have been in China, that she would have been the first generation to miss
she was in India.
I know, but if she... Yeah.
Yeah. No, my grandmother, her generation had the bound feet. But for some reason, my grandmother's father didn't approve of it. So my grandmother didn't have bound feet, but her friends all had bound feet.
Oh, and for those of you who don't know, by the way, this was a Chinese tradition that for some reason for a long, long time, they thought that it was beautiful for women to have small feet. So they would break their bones, their toes, and curl them under and crush them into smaller feet so that they could look.
And they keep it bound from when they were little until they died. So later on in life, they couldn't undo it because it was too painful if they didn't keep their feet bound. So they had to keep it bound.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
So, yeah. So my mother was lucky. My grandmother was lucky. She didn't need to have bound feet because her friend who we saw in India had bound feet. And when she unbound her feet to wash it, it stank.
Oh.
It was like rotting flesh.
Oh, mother. Oh. Oh. Yeah, because it probably was. That's exactly what it was, lady.
It was. And it was really painful. And you could tell when they're walking, they walk, it's like, it's painful to walk on it.
Yeah. It's not normal. Oh, okay. All right. Okay.
So then my mother got married. And then, of course, there was a big adjustment for her. She didn't know the language. She didn't know the city. And of course, then it was really hard for her. And then my grandmother expected a dutiful, obedient daughter-in-law. And my mother was just the opposite. She grew up, climbing up trees and stealing mango off trees and going to the neighbor's fruit tree and stealing fruit to eat.
Yep, that's where I get that from then.
Yeah. And then, of course, but my grandmother expected her to bow down and wash her feet and bring her tea and serve her. I think my mother may have done that if she had understood my grandmother, but she didn't understand. It's like a chicken talking to a duck. One goes quack and the other goes cluck cluck, and the two of them never the twain shall meet.
Yeah. Well, and also I've also met Nana. She would probably just not do what someone asked her to do anyway.
Yeah, because she was quite, and your Nana was a force to reckon with. She had really strong values, and she was really intelligent. When we were born, she didn't have any education up in the mountains, and she learned English. She didn't go to school or anything. She learned while we were studying in school. She would learn with us. So she learned how to read and write English. When we were in China in 1966 for that 1 year, she spent that year learning how to read and write Chinese, which even I can't do to this day. And then later on in life, she actually went back and did the high school courses and became a nurse. And she did that in her 50s, 40s, 50s. She became a nurse. But she was a really independent person.
Yeah, Nana's full of fire.
Yeah. So she was full of fire. And I think that's where you get it.
I get it from you, lady.
Well, I guess I get mine from her.
Yeah, there we go. It just keeps going. Okay, so that's a really good picture to paint of, that kind of being mixed race and not fitting into one place or another. But then, so now they're married. They don't get along that well anyway. 5 kids later, the Indochina War happened. So you grew up in a Catholic school because in India it was still part of the British Empire. So you went to school, right?
Yes.
In a Catholic school.
I went to school in a Catholic school, in a school run by nuns, British nuns. So when I first left India and I came to Canada, people who heard me speaking on the phone, or I talked to people on the phone or whatever, nobody ever thought I was Chinese or anything else but English. And then when they saw me face to face, they'd go, that can't be you, because your voice is like really English and your face is nowhere near English.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kind of sometimes, but also kind of not sometimes.
Yeah, because it was just that's how we, so that was what happened.
So tell me about that. Growing up in India, you spoke English and Hindi, really. Street,
yeah.
Well, you say street Hindi, but I don't know the difference. But
yeah, just the everyday Hindi.
Right. So
yeah.
But and there were so many, like, you're writing this book, which I'm saying this out loud so that you can keep writing this book, which is amazing. But there was such a melting pot of cultures there as well, right?
Yeah. So in India, in those days, there were thousands of Chinese who had actually gone to India,
right?
To work and to get away from the war. So there was a big Chinese community.
Right.
But also we were living in Calcutta. So in Calcutta, we were living in a Muslim area, but India was predominantly Hindu, right? And there were certain pockets where there were Muslims more concentrated, like a Muslim area, but most of the areas were more Hindu and stuff. So we grew up with this culture where we would celebrate just about everything. So we had every month there used to be some celebration or other, right? So there was always all these different Indian celebrations. We celebrated Indian celebrations. We celebrated the Chinese traditions, and we celebrated Easter and Christmas, and we celebrated the Muslim Eid thing and Diwali and all that. So it was celebration after celebration. Our life was fun.
No wonder I used to have all the parties, because you grew up just with festivities like as a constant thing. And good ones too. Yeah. Good festivals, like a good festivities. And I guess then, okay, so then as you were very young when the Indochina War happened, which I think...
Yeah, well, so the Indochina War was around 1962.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, around... And
it erupted over a disputed Himalayan border was the main cause of the war.
And the Indian then decided that anybody who was Chinese was a spy. Or if you had Chinese descendants, you were kind of a spy.
Okay.
Could be. And so they actually, we were lucky. We were in the city of Calcutta. So even though a lot of people were taken away at that time from the city of Calcutta
into prisoner of war camps,
into the Deoli, it's called the Deoli camp. Right, in Rajasthan, right? So Rajasthan is a very desert area.
Right.
So they went to Rajasthan, and my grandfather, like my mother's father, was working in near Darjeeling area, which is closer to the border. And his family was living in Kurseong, which is also closer to the border. So his second wife and the kids were all taken to the camp. So my aunts were captured. My grandfather was captured, and his second wife was captured, and they were taken to this camp in Rajasthan with no, and also I think it was also there were people in Calcutta. They'd get a knock on the door, and then they were told, okay, pack a small bag. You need to come with us. And they were taken away, and then they were put in the camp, and they were in the camp for 4 or 5 years. And then a lot of these Chinese people actually had businesses, they had homes. Once they went to camp, the Indians took all their things, confiscated everything, and then for 5 years later, when they were released, they came home to nothing. They were given a few dollars, And then they had to work their way back up to build their lives. So they were given a choice when they were in camp. They were told, look, you've got 1 month to leave this country. So when they first happened, a whole lot of Chinese people left. So they went to Australia, New Zealand, Canada, England. They left, and a lot of them even went to Taiwan. But those who didn't believe anything was going to happen, those who stayed and didn't want to just get up and go, were the ones who, some of them were put in prison just because they were Chinese. And like my father and knew people, so they had to bribe to stay out of prison. So India was very corrupt in those days as well. So dad used to, and then what happened was then the Indians came up with this decree where if you were Chinese, you needed a permission to, you have to go, and every month they had to go and register, to stay in Calcutta. And they couldn't go very far. They could only go so far in their area without a visa or a pass to go anywhere.
So then you're like what, 10 years old at this point?
I was about 10, 12 years old, 12 years old. And then, of course, my dad was planning on, we were actually processing our papers to come to Canada. And we actually had an interview to go to the Canadian High Commission and, to get our papers to come to Canada as a family. But what happened was then, because my grandfather was taken to the camp, and from the camp, they were given the choice. Those who wanted to go back to China, China sent a ship and said, you can come back home. My grandfather chose to go back to China because life in the camp was it was hard. But his second family decided no, they didn't want, because my mother's stepmother was Nepalese. She didn't want to go to China. So she stayed in the camp with her children, and all my aunts stayed. But my grandfather went to China by himself, and then he was in China. So he lost all his family because of that division. And then when he got to China, the government gave, because it was then communist. So he was given a job as a watchman in a factory. And he had a place to live, food to eat, and that was his job. So he went back. And of course, we hadn't seen him for years. So Mom said to my dad, I'm not going to Canada directly. I want to go and see my father before I go to Canada.
Oh, because Nana said that.
Nana said that.
Yeah. Okay.
So then we had to change our plans.
Oh.
We went into China.
But not all of you did.
No, my mother just took the two youngest children, which is my youngest sister and myself. So the three of us went to China. And this was in 1966. We went to China. And at the time, I was 14. I was a naive 14. I had no idea what China was or where China was. And I'd never been on a plane. And I don't even remember having to pack. I mean, one day I remember I was at the airport and, oh, look, we're going on a plane. Oh, wonderful. Yuppie, yuppie. And here we are, happy as hell. I didn't realize I wouldn't see my brothers and sisters and my father for years after that. Because we were
stuck.
Yeah, because we went to China and we were supposed to be there. In those days, a lot of Chinese people did that. The Chinese government would let you come in. You get a Chinese passport. You go to China. You spend 3 months. You surrender your passport. They give you an exit permit to go into Hong Kong because Hong Kong had a quota of so many Chinese people they would let into Hong Kong. So then we were supposed to get our exit permits in 3 months' time after staying in a hotel for 3 months. And then from there, you go to Hong Kong. And then we were going to go to Hong Kong. And then from Hong Kong, we were going to then come to Canada. Unfortunately, when we were in China, because my mother doesn't look Chinese, doesn't speak Chinese, doesn't even speak with a Chinese accent. And the deal with China and Hong Kong were you would let Chinese people in, the quota for so many Chinese people. So what we had to do was we had to get dressed up like the local people. We got clothes like the local people, like the communist blue pants and, with a top, and we had a haircut with a little bobble on the end, and we'd have to line up to cross the border. So we would go, and we had nothing with us. We just had a bag with 2 or 3 our clothes and no suitcase or whatever. And when we walked across the border, the Chinese side would say, okay, you can go. And then you have this big bridge you go. And then after you pass the midpoint, you come to the Hong Kong side. And the Hong Kong immigration then interviews you to see whether they let you in or not. And they knew, the Hong Kong side, they knew that a lot of overseas Chinese people were coming through this way and they had lots of money. So as soon as my mom and my youngest sister and mama and I went across and saw these people, the Chinese guys, they asked my mom, which, village are you from? And my mom said, oh, Sun Tak. And he says, I've never heard that accent from that village or anywhere in China.
So then they send you back.
They sent us back. They said, no, you're not Chinese, So we went back. And so every day we would go and line up and try and get across, hoping that there would be another officer who doesn't recognize us and they would let us through. But we weren't lucky enough.
How many officers were there? Were you just like, oh, it's these guys again? It's the not Chineses. It's the not Chinese people coming back.
They would just laugh every time. They said, no. And then we'd go back again to the hotel. And the thing was, there was this culture where all these overseas Chinese, there was one little local hotel where we all went to live before we went to line up to cross over, right? Yeah. And those who hadn't gotten through would be sitting at the balcony every day around 4 o'clock waiting to see who's coming down the dusty road.
Oh no, it's like the walk of shame.
No. It was, oh no, they're back again.
Oh no.
So we did this for months. And eventually, my father had to get somebody, because my father was still in India. He had to send a ton of money to somebody in Hong Kong who had to then find who to bribe in Hong Kong before we could be let into Hong Kong. And all that took 1 year. So in that 1 year, we did nothing. We lived in
Mandarin. That's when you learned Mandarin?
No. I mean, I was in Canton. I learned how to speak because there was no other choice.
Right.
We lived in the hotel. We didn't study. We just ate and played and tried to, So I would walk around with the hotel chambermaids and help them do up beds because there was nothing else to do.
Hmm.
So all we did was eat and sleep and play. And so for that one whole year, that's all we did. And I put on so much weight, I looked like a little piglet. I looked like a big dumpling.
So then, wait, while that was happening, the rest of the family were getting into Canada, no? Or not yet?
Yeah, no. So then my older sister, Florence, she got married and went to Holland. And they immigrated from Holland to Canada. And then she applied for us. Then she sponsored my brother first, and then, myself, and then my father and my mother and my younger sister. One by one, she sponsored us to come to Canada. So I came to Canada in 1971.
After you'd done high school in Hong Kong.
After I'd done high school in Hong Kong.
Which is why you speak Cantonese better than the rest of the family, really, because it's just...
Yeah, but I speak better because in China, Mum couldn't really speak. She tried, but it was like nobody really understood her. My younger sister was too shy to make much of an effort. Like
What? Auntie Saf was too shy? What?
When she was only 12.
Still.
I was 14. So I just made it a point to try and learn how to speak. And I mean, I would use my hands and whatever I could, try and gestures to make them understand. But I learned how to speak in that 1 year we were there.
Yeah, and you seem, and like all my like local friends in Hong Kong have said that your accent's like perfect. Your Cantonese is perfect.
I think I have a knack for picking up languages easier than
I would have liked. Yeah, I would have liked that, but to be passed on. That would have been nice.
Yeah. So the thing was, I picked up Cantonese, and then I picked up Mandarin. I'm the only one in my family who has picked up any Mandarin. So I picked up Mandarin by watching matinee Mandarin movies, the kung fu movies, the Bruce Lee movies.
Were they
Wong Yu movies. They were, because I'd finished school and then you got to go to see this movie it was quite cheap, and you could watch 2-3 movies at the same time. You didn't have to leave the theater. So I'd sit over there and watch it and read the subtitles.
Okay. So that's how you learned your language.
Yeah, that's how I learned Mandarin. And then, of course, when I went to China and I was using my Mandarin, I just think, okay, a Cantonese word with a little twist might be a Mandarin word.
Well, it is about 30%, isn't it? Transferability of Mandarin to Cantonese.
The thing was, when I was in China, they all thought I was so funny because I would make up these words, but they understood me.
So you just charmed the pants off them, Mum. That's what you did. You just charmed your way.
I actually did, I think, without realizing I was doing it.
So then at that point, the communist revolution was in full swing.
Yeah.
And then moving to Canada, how did the family come back together then? Because you all came then you graduated high school and came to Toronto. Was it Toronto?
Yes, I did. I graduated high school, and in those days when you finish high school, you don't learn all the things you do here now. We didn't know how to type or shorthand or anything. We just knew basics of English, arithmetic, and history and geography.
Pretty sure nobody learns shorthand now, Ma, but cool.
No, but I couldn't get a job
without shorthand.
Well, I couldn't really get a job. Like, what skills do you have?
And what was
why when I first came to Canada, I had no skills.
But wait, why? How was the experience of arriving as someone who, you come in as an English-speaking family, essentially, because Nana and Akong could speak English, but clearly don't look like anyone else. I mean, in the 60s, there was still quite a big Chinese population, right, at that point. So did you find that Chinese diaspora and kind of come together with them? Like, who did Akong know? How did everyone get to know everybody?
No, well, we didn't really. Like, when I was in China in 1966, it was during the Cultural Revolution, right? Then when I came to Canada, like when I came to Hong Kong, in Hong Kong, I wasn't accepted as Chinese because my Chinese wasn't good enough. And then I wasn't accepted as Indian because I wasn't Indian.
Yeah.
And so when I came to Canada, I was just Canadian, a new immigrant. But I didn't meet...
Nobody ask you?
No. And I didn't really have friends for a long time. My friend was the library. I used to spend a lot of time, any free time I had, I was at the library. because I had no friends. But by the time I came, I wasn't going to school, so you couldn't make friends at school. I wasn't out partying and drinking and stuff because I didn't drink.
Well, because you're supremely allergic to alcohol.
Yeah, I'm allergic to alcohol. At that time, I didn't know.
Oh,
and
you just didn't drink.
I just didn't drink. And the thing was, I tried making friends, and I thought, okay, this is a funny story.
Go on.
I joined. I thought I was joining a sports club.
Oh no!
So I had filled out all these forms to join this tennis club, to join a sports club, and then I found I was getting all these information about men that were being sent to me, and I couldn't figure out why. And it turned out it was actually a dating club, not a sports club.
How did you miss that? How did you miss that?
No, it was called a sports club.
Dating sport club. Well, at least it wasn't a cult.
It wasn't. There was nothing that said it's a dating club.
Oh.
So these people, and then when I found out, I refused to pay any more subscriptions.
How many subscriptions did you pay?
Just a joining fee. Oh. And after the joining fee, I refused to pay monthly because you're supposed to pay monthly. And I refused to pay. And then they took me to court. And of course, I didn't have the money to get a lawyer. I didn't have anything. So I went to court to represent myself.
What'd you say? Did you go to the library and get all the law books and be like, Your Honor?
I didn't know. No, I just went to nothing like that. I didn't know anything. And so when I went to court, they had 3 lawyers sitting on their side saying that I owe them this money. And I went up and they said, okay, what do you have to say for yourself? And I sat there and I said, look at my face. Do you think I need you to find me a date? Do I look like somebody who needs to go to a dating club?
That was your whole argument, was just this face look it needs your help?
Yeah, no, and I said, look, the ad says it's, to join the club to play sports and to play tennis. It's a tennis club and stuff. And I had actually written to them. I wrote to them to say, this is not right. And, that I refuse to pay and all that. And I showed the judge my letter. And he said, okay. And then
your face.
And
the
then,
letter and then your face.
And my face. So the judge said, okay, we will allow you, gave them $20 for the registration fees or whatever I had to pay them. But they didn't win the case. And at the end, when I was finished, the judge said, you made a mistake. You should have entered that letter as evidence. I didn't know that, because if I had, I probably would have not had to pay a penny.
Rude.
But I didn't know.
No. Well, at least you didn't get sued for whatever the other amount was.
So I went through there were a lot of funny incidents and very, should I say, naive. My naivete showed in many, many things that happened. You don't have enough time for it. You have to read the book to get it all.
Yeah.
It will be a laugh.
It will be. I'm sure it will, because you're a very good writer.
But I found when coming to Canada, most people were really friendly. I had no problem. There was no, differentiation. I didn't feel the cultural divide or anything. I just felt like myself, but I just felt naive and I had no friends. And it was a long time I didn't have any friends.
It was great. Most people were nice, but I didn't have any friends.
No, because I
know anything.
I didn't have time to make friends. I was working. I had to go to work, and I went to this employment office, and they said, "Well, what can you do?" I said, "Nothing." So they said, "What would you like to do?" I said, "Well, what can I do?" They said, "Well, look, there's a job here in a filling filling up shelves in this Acme novelty, is a novelty company. It's a department store. I said, okay, I'll give it a go. I have no idea what it is. And that's how my life went. It was one coincidence after another. I just took whatever job I could because I needed the job to pay for things. But it took me 2 hours to get to work and 2 hours back because I had to take I was living so far away. I had to take the GO train, then the train, then another 2 buses in between before I got to work. And in those days, the buses came every 20 minutes. So if you missed a bus, you had to stand in the bus stop for 20 minutes.
Mum, you took us to New Zealand. We had to wait. Okay, you're complaining about 20 minutes, lady? An hour. An hour.
Yeah, but how often did you do that?
Many times, actually.
Yeah.
There were many times.
You had a choice.
Every day. Okay, fine.
But you were driven a lot of places. You had family there. I had no one.
Wait,
and I just had
everyone else?
I was alone in Canada at the time because my brother was in Toronto downtown. He didn't ever see me. My sister was in Woodstock, which was like 2 hours drive away. Oh. So I was living by myself.
Where was Auntie Sept?
She hadn't come yet.
Where was she?
She was in Hong Kong at the time.
Where was Nana?
She was in Hong Kong too.
Why did you? Oh, so you came first to work and then you went back to Hong Kong, didn't you?
Yes.
Okay.
That was, 10 years later, I went back to Hong Kong. But that's, again, like I said, you don't have enough time for everything.
Well, I mean, okay, but this is an interesting, because I think the whole concept of how much you've had to move, and then let's skip forward some time, and obviously you went back to Hong Kong on an assignment, and then you met Dad and stayed in Hong Kong, and then that's where we were born, right?
Yeah.
So when you got to Hong Kong, like, did you kind of made that was home then for a while, right? Well, I mean, that's my home.
Yeah. Well, wherever I was home to me, because I was just, so used to just picking up and leaving everything and going everywhere. So when you girls were born, Hong Kong was home. And then 1997 came and we had to do something.
We left in 94, didn't we?
No, 95.
Okay. Right.
So we left in 95 and went to New Zealand because that's where your father's family was.
And just for those of you who don't know, in 1997 was when the end of the British reign, as it were. It was when 1997 was the handover and China took back Hong Kong. But there's still a trade agreement that was agreed upon that was a 50-year agreement to be one party, two systems. Is that what it was called?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So Hong Kong became a special administrative region. And so my experience as a child, which is so interesting because I think of all of our family, I've moved the same kind of, not in the same context, but I've moved more than my sisters. And I've kind of lived in more different cultures, similar to kind of the way that you did. But I'm interested in how it's hard. We don't have all the time in the world, but I'm interested in when you had us, how did you look at us and say, okay, what did you do that was different to how your parents were? Because there were so many different traditions that you grew up in. And, I still consider us to be Chinese and of Chinese descent, very much because of where I've grown up and the language and the culture and the festivals. But how did you look at upbringing, like bringing up children, and how did you decide you wanted to do things differently? What did you do?
Well, I did a lot of reading. I read a lot about, all kinds of things. And when you kids were born, I wanted you all to have fun. I wanted you to have the life that I didn't have. And so, whatever festival was on, I thought it wasn't because of the festival. It was fun, to take you to do something different. So I would
for the Lantern Festival.
Yeah, so we do the lanterns, and then we'll do the Halloween. For the Halloween, I make costumes, so I buy costumes, make costumes, and so I wanted y'all to enjoy the world, not just one culture. but every culture that there was that was around us. So wherever we were, we participated in whatever there was. And then I used to actually in take you girls, to watch plays from different schools, just because it was a play. We didn't go to the actual theater, but we went to the school plays, and it was fun watching children do shows and singing and dancing and all. So I liked doing that with you girls because it kept you girls busy. It kept you involved in whatever was going on around you. So in Hong Kong, Chinese festival, where I'd get you girls dressed and we'd go out. And then I had this thing with you girls. I wanted y'all to feel special. So once a month, y'all had a mummy day, and you all got to choose whatever you wanted to do and do whatever you wanted. Your wish for the day was what I gave you.
And of course, mine
was food.
To eat our way through Hong Kong.
But it was fun, wasn't it?
It was so fun. It was my favorite. I always look forward to those days because we'd get up in the morning and then it would be my day. So then we'd start with the Dai Pai Dongs and we'd have breakfast. We'd have breakfast. And how do you explain the Dai Pai Dongs, Ma?
Well, Dai Pai Dongs are just street food.
Yeah, but they have they're like almost permanent structures.
Yeah, they're permanent.
They were at the time.
And they're built on the streets, but they were almost like permanent temporary restaurants.
And
they were cheap and they were delicious, though.
And there was zero food regulation standards.
Yeah, yeah.
So
and
our
they'd
stomachs
wash the wok and
iron.
pour it on the street, and
yes, yeah. And then we would walk by the hawkers, and the hawkers would have their trolleys with all of their food, their
the
squid
fish
tentacles and fish balls
and then you wanted to, and then we'd have
pancakes.
the dragon candy and the pancake with the peanut sauce.
Well, I hope I hope you're all eating brunch right now. If you're listening to this or you're about to have breakfast, because you'll be very jealous otherwise, envious. But it's interesting because you had the same affinity when you were in India, because you used to love the street food in India.
Yes, it's the same. Yeah, and India was the same. You'd go. I'd walk from home to my aunt's place, and on the way, there's all these hawkers on the streets and little shops and stuff, and we'd stop and buy, whatever they were selling. And I loved the pani puris. We'd stop and we'd call the puchka man, say, hang on, and he gives you a leaf that's wrapped up in like a cup, and then you hold it, and there's 4 or 5 people standing on the street, and he'll fill one up, dip it in the tamarind sauce and give it to you. And while you're eating yours, the next person gets his, and so by the time it comes back round to you, you finished your first one. So then you get your second one.
Oh, that's such a smart idea. Just a little food trade.
So it's like a food trade. And the thing was, you'd get like for 4 annas, you'll get 6 or you'll get 8. You say how many dollars worth you want or rupees worth you want. And then he counts. And I don't know how he keeps track of the counting, but then he gives you your, and then of course, and then you go, there were certain days we'd go to certain areas, and in Victoria Memorial, all these different hawkers, they'd have all their wares on the streets, and then you'd have the ice cream. And so it's just the life was so colorful.
Yeah, so you were so used to, because I still remember, okay, and that was the other thing I wanted to say was, yes, okay, so shout out Canada for being like really nice and accepting to mum, except for not having very many friends. But when you went to New Zealand, that was a shock.
Yes, it was quite a shock. But again, I had good neighbors and I was willing to try anything. I've always been adaptable. So when we went to New Zealand,
mean to you? Or were you just like, because I feel like you did, and you just, because of what you've gone through, relatively speaking, it's just not that bad. Like, I think that it happened a lot and you got taken advantage of a lot. Don't
I
let
was
them say
taken.
no. I was there.
But that was nothing to do with the people. People were, I think I got along with people really well because I was always friendly. I was willing to talk to anybody who was willing to talk to me. And people were always very friendly to me. And I was always willing to help anybody who needed help. I mean, I got ripped off and then I'd just write it off and carry on. Just because you got ripped off once doesn't mean you start distrusting everyone. And I never learned my lesson. I mean, I'd get ripped off and then I'd go, okay, you know. Lost that. And you go on and then.
You're underselling this right now. Just to everyone that's listening, my mother is literally the most generous person on the planet. Which
I don't know about
me.
That, but...
Yeah, I do. It pains me. It just pains me when you're like, oh yeah, you know, people are nice. They weren't. They were assholes. They weren't all nice. They did take advantage multiple times. If you know, when we have a conversation with Dad at some point, I think there'll be a very different story that comes out about how much you gave and how much people were like, oh, cool, thanks.
But again, you know, at the time, I think everybody considered me like rich. And I could afford a lot more than other people could, or some people could. So I never saved anything. I spent whatever we had. Nobody ever taught me money management. I never learned anything practical in my life other than falling down and picking myself up and learning from that.
And going to the library.
Yeah, and going to the library. And I used to that's how I learned. You know, I learned a lot of arts and crafts. And that's why when you girls grew up, I was making Barbie houses and Barbie doll clothes. And I was making up cakes that I'd never... Because when I was young, I never had to cook or clean or do anything. We had servants to do everything. When I came to Canada, I couldn't even boil water without burning the pot.
I think I'm going to remind you of that when I am needing my weekly frozen food delivery because we all know how well I can cook.
You know how many times I made a hole in a pot because I forgot I had water boiling? But you learn through your mistakes.
Well, yeah. Or you just get your mother to make you food.
Yeah, well, I couldn't ask anybody to do anything for me because I had nobody to turn to. And that does make a difference. When you've got family and close friends, your life is it's very different from if you're on your own and you're relying on your own, you know, nous to sort of, okay, how do I do this? How do I do that? And I didn't have internet then. Now I'm a expert. I can go on YouTube and do anything. I can fix the toilet. I can do woodwork.
There was a time, actually, I think it was like 5 years ago, that Mum was like, I bought a book from the library and I'm going to rewire the house. And I think, thankfully, we all were like, that is definitely not something that you're going to do. But yes, when you went from New Zealand onwards, you really started getting into the DIY in a dangerous way. Yeah. And I do mean dangerous because you would do crazy things.
But look, I mean, we're still here and I managed to change all the light fittings and fix the toilet.
When did you change the light fittings, Ma?
When we bought this house, I changed all the light fittings. You didn't tell us that
you shouldn't have done that by yourself.
Too late. It's all done and it's been working for the past 10 years. No problem.
Okay, we'll talk about that later. But okay, I want to go back to the educational side of things because there is a little element there where I do want to talk about really quickly is that glass ceiling, right? Like you've said to me so much and you know how busy, I mean, I'm literally only alive with sustenance in my stomach because of you to this day. I just ate one of the dongs that you froze for me before. And that was my dinner. But you always had this glass ceiling despite being all the aunties, they just never could get past secretary, right? And at that 60s, 70s, like you weren't, just talk about that for a minute. Like how different was it being a woman in, growing up?
Well, it wasn't so much being a woman. It was like not knowing who to turn to or not knowing what resources were available for you. When I first came to Canada, I didn't know I could go to the government for a handout to go and study. I wanted to become a doctor. I wanted to go into medicine, but it wasn't in my. I had nothing other than high school. Nobody to help me pay anything. I had to try and make ends meet when I was 18, and I had to get a job. And so I had 3 jobs sometimes. Like I was working for Kentucky Fried Chicken, and I was working, in my office job. And when I first started, I wasn't a secretary. I just jumped from one job to another to another. Whenever I was offered a job which paid a little bit more, I took it. So starting from just being a shop assistant, stocking shelves, I was offered a job as a data processor. I had no idea what data processing meant in those days. And it's not like now. In those days, it was like these big sorting machines. And all you had to do was stack the cards and then feed it into the machine over and over to get the numbers in the right, and then push the buttons. And then, then I thought, well, I can't do this for the rest of my life. And somebody offered me a job. I applied for a job in a bank because I saw an ad as a teller. And I thought, oh, I'll do that. I went and worked as a teller. And while I was working there, I had to go to Vancouver to see my sister. And I gave up that job. And then I was offered, when I came back, I didn't have a job. And somebody who used to come to the bank said to me, oh, we missed you at the bank. Where have you been? I said, I was in Vancouver. And he said, what are you doing? I said, I don't know. I have to look for a job. He says, come to our office. We're looking for an inventory control clerk. And I thought, what the hell is inventory control?
Okay, it's counting. You just seem to count stuff.
Yeah. So then I
something?
just,
sure. Okay.
Yeah. So that's how it happened. And then I figured, this is not, I had to get a better job. So I saved up enough money to put myself back to study executive secretarial course. So that's how I got into the executive secretarial. And then, of course, I had my executive secretarial course, and then I went to see Nana in Vancouver. And then I took a part-time job in a bank because I thought, okay, I'm going to be there for a few months. And while I was working as a teller, the bank manager said, you're too good to be here. I have a client who needs a secretary. Do you want to meet with him? Can you meet? I met with him. He was a lawyer. And he said, I need a legal secretary. And I said, I have no idea what a legal secretary does. I haven't studied legal. He says, no, I'd like to give it a go. So I started working for him. And I then decided I wanted to better myself. And I went to night school to learn the legal jargon and learn how to become a paralegal. So I was learning at the same time as working. So all my life, I've always sort of not just taken work, but I've always tried to find ways of improving whatever I was doing.
And I think that's a really important point because, when, especially in all of the career pathway stuff that I'm doing, and how angry and passionate I get about reducing those barriers to entry, like just thinking about an immigrant's journey into a new country, and then all the barriers to entry being things that they don't even know to ask. And some people who are brought up in one space, one culture, and even just having all of those mixed cultures from the very beginning of your existence, it almost feels like, it sounds like when you say it, I'm kind of putting together that picture of, you don't think that there were any like stereotypical gender stereotypes or glass ceilings because you were just so different in every way that I don't think any one thing could be attributed to any one thing.
No. Well,
so there's just so much difference. There's just so much that you were like, didn't fit in this way, didn't fit in that way, didn't fit in that. It's like all these barriers as well that you had, but then you kept just jumping them because someone told me, my friend Maxine told me the other day about the concept of racial stamina. And I think for you, it was like, it's more than that. It was just genuinely like social stamina, like just moving and going from and dealing with war and dealing with revolutions and dealing with all these things that were so much bigger than you. all the time and then just trying to get by and improve at the same time. Like that's pretty impressive.
And I think, and I don't think, like, I think with my generation or with me, I never thought deeply about, the world or what my future is going to be. My thoughts were always immediate, like, what do I need to do in order to put food on the table, to pay my rent, to get past day one and day two. So there was no thought of future because I couldn't see that far. Yeah. It's like Maslow's theory of the hierarchy, right?
Oh my gosh. Did you just... is Dad standing there? Is Dad listening to you say Maslow's hierarchy of needs right now?
No, I studied that.
I know, but we all know that he would be very happy to hear that. We'll tell you that story another time, audience.
So
good old Maslow.
So the thing was, I never saw past the level I was at. I mean, I would look a little bit forward. I would look a little bit forward to see how I can improve where I was, but I couldn't look to the peak. Like, this is where I want to be.
And I think, okay, that's what you get.
But the difference is with your generation, you have so much, like the internet, the social media, you've got people talking to you, you hear people. In my time, I didn't have social media. I didn't have anybody telling me, hey, did you know you could go there and you can get a handout? Or you could go there and you get this or that?
Don't you think that sometimes now, like, there's too much stuff? Like, you had the library. Those people, people didn't just throw a new book up every day. Now there's so much information. It's so saturated.
Yeah, but this is now you're so saturated. You have to pick and choose, but you have the choice to pick and choose. You can just skim this and say, oh, look, this doesn't interest me. I'll go to the next one. It's like now, I mean, I'm reading 2 books at a time and I think, oh, this doesn't interest me. I send it back to the library. While I'm sitting here in bed, I just go, okay, I don't want this. So I'll get another one. I get another book. In my day, if you didn't like it, you had to walk, take the bus, take 2 buses, go to the library before you could return it.
So now all you do is read. Again, classic. Read and cook all the food for me.
Yes. I mean, now I'm
and garden.
Comfortable in trying anything. I'm willing to try. I think that's the big thing. You have to be willing to give life a go.
Yeah. Well, I asked you to give life a go as a United Nations ambassador. I distinctly remember suggesting that you did that and become a lawyer. It's not too late. I think it would be fascinating for you, and the world will be a better place if you just...
Yeah, I think I could be a good lawyer.
Yeah, I think so too. Yes.
Yeah. I can argue a point really well.
I think so. Yes, this is true. I've experienced that happening many times. But so just in kind of wrapping it up then, you brought up kids like me for better or worse. But I think what you did was pave a path, and I really feel like, that I feel a lot of that. I think the word is othering, where you just don't feel like you fit in anywhere. But I also felt like you made our family so strong. And you were very, very good at telling us the stories of our past and where we came from and our ancestors. Like we've always known. And I've been particularly interested, and that's just the way that I am, because I think I am essentially you. And, you talk to like all of your kids, like all three of us, we talk to you every day. Like you've cooked for all of our friends. You've poured your heart and soul into creating the community that you didn't have when you were growing up.
It was more the family. I mean, I just loved the 3 of you, and I would do anything for all of you.
Yeah, I know. And
so I did my best to give you what I could.
Yeah, but you also built your life around doing that. Like we have, I mean,
yes.
We had
that was
puppet
my
shows.
choice.
With the master bedroom of our house, of our apartment in Hong Kong, was converted into a giant playroom. Like, you really went above and beyond, lady. Like, you didn't just be like, oh, I give you the best that I can. You're like, how can I wrangle the entire world for my daughters to have the best universe possible?
No, but that was because, like, when I had the master bedroom, you girls were always in my bedroom playing. So I decided, well, if you're going to play there that much, I might as well move my bed out.
Oh, I might
to the playroom
and then construct an entire wall-to-ceiling shelving unit, custom made, to shelve all of our organized Barbies. What was it?
And the Barbie
Star Wars, my Darth Vader thing that had all of the Star Wars characters in it.
I still have that.
I know I lost some of those pieces, didn't I?
Yeah, but we've still got the case. The Darth Vader case.
Okay, well, if anyone wants to come for a picnic at Mum's, barbecue at Mum's, and to take a look at this super old Darth Vader head that has most of the little figurines inside it, then...
No, it doesn't have most of it.
What do you mean?
Of them.
Well,
I don't know where they are.
That many of them. Okay, well, anyway... The point is, in summary, this is about Asian Heritage Month, and you grew up in all of these Asian countries, but as someone who was brought up with the English language, learning other languages, kind of being accepted, I guess, because you were so apart from everyone, you were so unique. Like, in my mind, you don't look Chinese, but I'm biased. I don't know, and so you never really kind of fit in. So people always had to just create an identity for you, I guess. Or was that how you felt?
Yeah. No, I mean, I don't think I ever thought about any of those things. I was just me. I mean, if people didn't like me, they didn't like me because of me, not because of who I am.
So what do you think when I go into the world? Like, what were your concerns when I was like, hey, Mum, I mean, apart from the fact that I was like, I want to work in entertainment. What were your concerns?
I didn't have any concerns. I knew you were capable of doing whatever you wanted to do. I wasn't worried about you. I was just...
worried ever? Come on.
Well, I was worried I just wanted to make sure, but I just wanted to be there to support you, whatever you chose to do. I didn't want to force you into something you didn't want to do. Yeah. I didn't have any idea as to what I wanted you to be. I wanted you to decide what you wanted to be.
So if you could be Mama Lau and you could be mum to every single person who was listening to this, what would be the one thing that you'd say to, like, if every single audience member was me, what would you say? And I mean, that's a long...
I would say, believe in yourself and do what feels right for you. Follow your gut. Trust yourself to know what you want and what you would like to do. Sometimes you can't do what you want to do, but you try your best and then move on.
If you could have done something differently at a point in your life, what would that thing be?
You mean as a profession? Or
whatever. Like if it was a profession, I think you'd probably have gone to medical school, right?
Yeah. If I had a choice, either medical school or lawyer, or I would be social work, because I like helping people.
Yeah. But then do you always think that you like helping people to disguise, like to not pay attention to others? Like, I always find, how I'm like, oh, I've just been doing all this stuff for other people and I haven't done anything for myself. And then I burn myself out and you have to pick me up off the floor. Like, do you think that you like helping people so much because you don't want to help, you don't want to be dealing with yourself? Like, you want to just busy yourself away from yourself?
No, I think I like helping people because I know what it felt like when I was alone and I had nobody. So when I see somebody in that position, I think of what I would have given for somebody to just give me a helping hand. When I was all alone and I had nobody, it might have changed my life. It might have made a big difference. And I think I have made a difference to some of the girls who've come through my life.
Oh,
you know,
everyone who meets you for 2 minutes, lady. Some of the people who have come through your life. Crazy.
No, I think you're biased.
No, I am 100% not biased.
I think you're just being biased.
No. That's a hard no. That's a hard no, lady.
I don't think I'm that great, but I just think
what?
I just
what happened to the lady that was like, "Do you think this face needs your help?"
Yeah, that was me. I was fighting for my own rights.
Yeah. And your own rights to be the generous person and take a compliment. Mother, take the compliment.
Thank you.
Okay, that was a good try. But yes, I mean, I think that you impact people because of, I mean, look at what I've been able to do and how I've been able to help people and how my sisters have been able to help so many people as well. Yeah. That's all the influence, as well as all of the people that you've been a mentor to and taken care of over the years.
Yeah, I think it's also because my mother always taught us to respect everyone, no matter where the station in life was. So although I had maids as kids, we grew up with having a chauffeur, having a laundryman, having a cook. We never disrespected them. We never treated them any different than if we treated a friend. So I would sit with our maid and, when she was eating a very simple chickpea with the chili and salt, I'd say, I'd go have some, and I'd give her some of my food. Or, we always learned to share what we had. And I think maybe that's my thing. Like, I don't want to see somebody struggling if I can help them. Right? Because it reminds me of what my life used to be like, how hard I had to work. And nobody was there to say, I'll give you a hand. Well, or I can give you a lift.
If I was there, Mummy, I would have helped you.
I know. So, but in a way, that has made me the most independent person that I could be. Yeah. To learn to stand on my own 2 feet, I had to just take the leap and do whatever I needed to do.
Yeah, it's true. Move to New Zealand, move to Australia, move to Canada.
Yeah.
So it was like, all those places.
Yeah, but you learn from it, and we had a good life. I mean,
we're not done, woman. Jeez. This is not the end of the world, knock on wood. We had a good life.
Well, you still have a good life.
Yes, we have. We have present tense. I'll see you on the weekend.
Yeah. Well, when you consider some people don't have family around to help them as much as you have. So you're lucky.
I don't think anyone has someone personally delivering frozen meals. I don't think anyone else gets that. They have to pay a company for that. And it's not as good food. So yes, Mama Lau's frozen delivery service is not available for all of the rest of you. Unfortunately, it is my privilege. And
yeah, I think you're overstating. I don't think I'm that.
No.
Anyways.
Okay. So just before we go, thanks, Ma'am. Thanks for sharing all of our family stories and history. And this little picture that we've got, this little thumbnail, is on the far left-hand, if you're looking at it, I guess from the left to the right, on the far left is my akong, is my grandfather. And then that's my uncle. Isn't that Uncle Edwin?
Yes, it's Uncle Edwin.
Uncle Edwin is sitting there right next to, in between him and my grandmother. And then and you can see tiny little Mama Lau in that little jean with your feet.
Right in the middle.
Yeah, right in the middle, the tiniest of them, or one of the tiniest of them all. And then on the other side of the family is just behind them are my other aunties. And then on the other side is my grandmother's sister and her family, right?
Yeah. 2 sisters and a brother.
2 sisters and a brother.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thanks, Ma. Thanks for spending all this time. And I think we're all going to look forward to reading the book when it is finished.
Thank you for listening to me. I hope I wasn't too long-winded.
No, you were just perfectly winded.
Thank you. It was nice reminiscing.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Ma. Love you.
Love you too. Bye,
Okay.
everyone.
Bye. Thanks for listening, Bombshells. In order to continue to elevate, subscribe and don't forget to click that little bell so you can get notified every time we have a new badass brunch. Until next time, stay focused, fierce, and fabulous.